Hello and welcome everybody to Booze Hour Cloud Edition today. Today I will have on David Warburton from the F5 Labs team, and he will talk through the upcoming phishing and fraud report that the F5 Labs team releases, and he is the author of that. Now, David is actually a return guest, so if you dial back into the summer time frame, he actually came on and talked about Crypto Nice before. So he's one of the few coveted multi-guest appearances so far. So I'm sure he's really proud of that. We'll talk about that achievement when we bring him on the show. But a couple of things here. The folks may have noticed I haven't been live lately. And if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, so if you go to youtube.com/DarylandBoo, hit subscribe. On there, you'll actually notice that I've been doing a little bit of different content, just actually recorded stuff of things that I've been up to lately, but just trying to keep things fun and fresh. The next couple of weeks and the weeks coming up to now have been a little bit busy with a bunch of internal stuff that's used or sucked up a bunch of my time for things that we've had to be on live for and presenting for. So in a couple of weeks here, a couple of weeks ago, it was actually F5's fiscal year starting. And so in the next couple of weeks here, there will be fun stuff to talk about from F5. So there will be the need to jump on live streams anyways. So look forward to that. We'll be jumping on to talk about all of those things. Now, what I also wanted to talk through is the giveaway. So got some candy here. This is leftover Halloween candy. I realize that folks may not want to right now, so you can still enter into the draw. And what I'll do is I'll make a donation instead if you want to still participate in this giveaway, but don't necessarily want to receive candy. But you have the option to still receive the candy and the donation. So all you have to do is leave a comment as we're live here, and then towards the end we will do a random name selection. Now, if nobody enters, then I would be very sad, first of all. But at the same time, I'll remind people as we go through here as well, in case you're not watching on this part. But if nobody makes any entries, then I'll make a donation just for whoever I want to make the donation to. A couple other things. So I reminded everybody to subscribe to the YouTube channel. So youtube.com/DarylandBoo. If you're watching from LinkedIn right now, if you head over to the YouTube channel, hit subscribe from there, then you'll see the other content that I do. If you are on LinkedIn and you found this somehow, hit follow on my page. But the YouTube is where all the archives are. So you can see all the previous shows and you can see all the content that I've been putting out lately as well. There's a website, DarylandBoo.com. We run a newsletter from there. Every week, there's a weekly technical newsletter that comes out. So you can check that out. There's actually, if you look at the description for this stream right now, there is a free sticker link on there. So you head over to that, fill out the information. I will send you some stickers if you're in North America, and you'll be subscribed to the newsletter as well. A couple of things. These are the stickers, by the way. Very nice stickers. And that's about it. I think we've gone over everything now. So I will, without further ado, bring on David.
Hey,
Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Not too bad. So, first of all, I want to congratulate you on being one of the illustrious multi-Booze Hour guests. You were on in the summer.
What, third time now, I think?
Yes.
In total?
Yes. On the channel. So on Booze Hour, you've been on twice, or this will be your second show on Booze Hour. And you were on, that's a great reminder, you were on the Daryl and Boo show, because we have multiple shows on this channel. It's pretty crazy. But we have our Monday show. You were on that as well, and we got to chat with you on there. So you're a veteran on here. We'll send you a badge.
You're right. I mean, you know how YouTubers, once they get to a certain number of subscribers, get some kind of like special plaque from YouTube or from Google. I feel like maybe it's time to start sending out those for a big guest.
I got to check the budget for that. So, so you know what? Maybe we'll earn maybe we'll sell this
Right.
candy, and then we can put it towards giving people plaques
That works.
instead. But you know what? If people look around right now, all the graphics on here, you wouldn't believe it, but they're actually just done by me. And so I can, design some pretty cool stuff, and maybe I'll come up with a plaque that I can send to folks. We'll see. So, David, you're from the F5 Labs team. Why don't we take a minute to just talk about you for folks that haven't seen you on the previous shows before, your background and what you do at F5.
Yeah, cool. So this is my 8th year at F5 now, so I've been around a little while. For about 5 or 6 of those, I was an SE, so very much on the kind of technical pre-sale side of things. So I've come from knowing a good amount about kind of products and solutions. And with the customers I worked for a long time, I was getting asked so many questions around kind of crypto and ciphers and modes of operation that I just found it super interesting. Didn't have a clue what they were talking about, even though I vaguely understood TLS and HTTPS. So I took myself back to uni, and coming out of that was just thinking that cybersecurity and research was just fascinating. And there was a great opportunity at the time for me to move to the F5 Labs team. So I'm now part of the F5 Labs team. We perform research and almost kind of educational or evangelism type events where we'll work on either performing proactive scans or analyzing breach trends over the past 12 months or decade even. We'll produce either very kind of reactive threat intelligence reports on maybe new malware that's or new DDoS strains that are kind of coming out. But we also produce much bigger form kind of reports that, again, will look at much bigger, much longer trends. So we've got a few kind of hero reports, things like the IoT report, which kind of looks at how IoT devices have been compromised and used to launch DDoS attacks and so on. There's the TLS report, which I think I've mentioned previously. That's another one that I've worked on, and that looks on how people are deploying TLS and SSL kind of differently and how that's evolving over the years. As well as the application protection report. That's a big one for us. And I think you've had Sander on, one of my colleagues, before, talking about that report series. And then obviously the phishing and fraud one, which I'm just kind of concluding at the moment. So, and we'll publish all of these on f5labs.com, and anyone, you don't have to be an F5 customer. Anyone can go and either sign up for the emails or just go and have a little browse and download the reports and find what's useful. And I think the thing I quite like about the work we publish on Labs is that it's fairly broad in terms of the kind of demographic it's talking to. There are absolutely some kind of very low-level deep dives into malware and cross-site scripting attacks and things that we've done like that. But also there are much higher-level pieces that really are aimed more for either CISO level or really anyone in any kind of security management position. Much more kind of framework, policy, decisions, ideas, and the reasons behind why you would choose certain security controls versus other ones, for example.
Yeah, very cool. You know what I've really liked about F5 Labs as well? It is agnostic, so it's not about what F5 is selling or anything like that. It's about the data that we can get out of F5, though. And I think what's important to look at is that we see all of these attacks coming in, and on one aspect, we react to it for a customer on their behalf. We take that data and we can block certain things or do whatever they want us to do because we have managed services or we have products that will handle this kind of stuff. But on the same token, there's all this information that should be out there. I mean, we use it to our benefit, but we can also parlay that into F5 Labs, and then you guys are there to curate that information, basically get that out to the public, which I think is pretty cool. And it's all the better. You read through these reports, they don't mention F5 products in them. You guys stay, fairly away from that, and then give the information to the people to do what they need to do with it.
Yeah, this is it. And we try and do that just to make sure that we're being as open and honest and trustworthy as possible, because clearly if we only ever researched the topics that we just happen to have a great solution for, or only ever used our own data, then it's going to come, very rightly so, it's going to come across as being quite biased. So we're absolutely, we'll combine both internal data sets or corroborate it with external data sets. We've got some other external partners that we use, as well as kind of open source. And you're right, at the end of it, generally we like to make recommendations. We like to kind of say, the kinds of things that will mitigate this risk are whatever it might be, but we won't go as far as saying it's this F5 product or it's this Nginx or Shape solution. We'll give you ideas, and some of those solutions will be nothing, will be something that we don't necessarily have a solution for. Hopefully we'll have a part to play in the overall strategy of mitigating any kind of risk, but no, we certainly don't go for just the problems we happen to solve.
Yeah, and that's and you coming in from the sales organization side of things is actually unique for F5 Labs, because we've talked to Sander before. Ray Pompom has actually come up to Vancouver to do events before, and those guys don't have an F5 background whatsoever. So you're a bit unique there, right?
Right. Yeah. There's actually only now one colleague I've got that's come across from a similar part of the kind of technical sales organization, but certainly most of the team, most of the researchers are not F5 people, kind of born and bred. Most of them are quite new, and they actually only have a moderate understanding of what we do at any kind of level, because that's not what we're here for, really. It's great if we can marry some kind of solution, but ultimately we're here to just kind of research and report on what we see.
Cool. So I've done a skim of the 2019 report, and you've been working on the 2020 report.
Yeah.
Maybe we can go into maybe at a high level. I know the report isn't out yet, so maybe you won't have all the details for us, but maybe from a high level, what you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, hopefully we are aiming to get this out within the next week or two, all things being well. But certainly most of the work is done now in terms of collecting data and kind of performing the scans and so on. And what I've been really excited about this year is we've got more data than ever to perform the analysis and come to some conclusions on. So we've combined data from the F5 Security Incident Response Team. We've combined data from the F5 Security Operations Center, Silverline. We've got external data partners with the likes of Webroot. We've got dark web security research firms to look at kind of stolen payment card data, as well as open source phishing lists and so on. So we've really got a huge amount of data that we've used to kind of trawl through, to corroborate, and to really make sure that the conclusions we're drawing are as accurate as possible. And sometimes you have to make some assumptions when you're looking at big long lists or numbers. But that's when obviously having multiple different data sets can corroborate the kind of findings. So that's been really good. And what we found this year is very much an evolution rather than a kind of revolution in terms of how fraudsters and attackers are conducting their phishing attacks. I think some of the key things that are very much clear is that phishing is growing as an attack kind of threat, as a risk. Certainly it's not abating at all. And in fact, we've had other reports from other vendors and security research firms over the past year that corroborate that, because phishing just works. They've seen the Verizon data breach report said that they saw a decline in malware. The Europol's recent report, Europol's actually has a very great report on cybercrime. And they as well noted that phishing is growing, while other kind of, you might consider more advanced, more direct attacks like malware, ransomware, website compromise is declining to some extent because phishing just works so well. So what we've seen is very broadly 15% year-on-year increase on the number of kind of incidents, but specifically just over the kind of main periods, I would say, of lockdown, when the coronavirus kind of really started to take hold on a lot of countries, and various nations were imposing local or national lockdowns. A lot more people were working from home. The spikes of phishing attacks that were conducted during those times were huge. They were in excess of 220% of the kind of normal yearly average for that period. So we've seen some very definite trends in terms of things being, just growing, generally speaking, also very specific growth over the lockdown and, most COVID specific periods of kind of home working. But on the whole, phishing attacks are very much the kind of same.
Interesting. And so with the increase in the amount of phishing attacks, are you also seeing an increase in how effective they are?
Yes. Now, we don't always get to see the end result of a phishing attack. Certainly, It's more our internal data set that will kind of give us a glimpse in terms of that, because it's our own staff, it's the F5 Security Operations Center team that are actually responding to phishing attacks and helping to do things like website takedowns and mitigating those kind of risks. So we don't always get the full picture. So this is where corroborating external reports and external data sets can be really helpful. But one thing that was actually really interesting is working with some of the Shape research team. And in some incidents, we've been able to find out just how quickly fraudsters and attackers are actually kind of turning around stolen credentials. I mean, there are many kind of different aspects or objectives, I should say, for phishing. It could be to deliver malware, it could be to steal intellectual property, but predominantly they're after credentials and they're after the ability to commit financial fraud. So Shape obviously really come into play when they're protecting automated kind of transactions, automated fraudulent transactions, I should say. And so in some cases, they were actually monitoring the time that it took to feed in fake credentials to a known phishing site, and then monitoring that in the back end when they were protecting customers with Shape systems, to see how long it took the attackers to turn around to grab those stolen credentials and use them for an actual active attack. So for one customer in particular, they found that it could be as quick as 4 hours. It's certainly not, days or weeks. Attackers are not sitting there waiting for a database to reach, full before they'll go and grab all those credentials and start using them. It is literally a matter of hours before they're being turned around and used to try and perform some kind of financial fraud. But in some cases, we've seen the kind of growth of real-time phishing attacks or real-time phishing proxies. So these are interesting because they also, not only do they mean that your credentials, once stolen, are being used much quicker, I mean, literally in real time, those real-time phishing proxies actually make it easier for attackers to circumvent things like multi-factor authentication. So the traditional way of phishing would be for me to send you a bogus address, send you off to a website that I've either cloned or have used a phishing kit to knock up. And I'll sit there and, whether it be hours or days later, I'll then log on to my drop zone, pick up all those credentials, and then try and use them at some point. Real-time phishing proxies, as the name kind of suggests, I would send you a link, but you're not connecting to somewhat of a static website, you're connecting to a proxy. And as an attacker, I would sit and monitor this proxy in real time. And so as you then try and log into the website, into your bank, you're actually giving credentials to my phishing page. But I'm then submitting them to the bank, to the real bank website in real time. Now, what this means is because all the transactions are happening in real time, so from yourself to me as the fraudster, and from myself as a fraudster to the bank, if your bank sends you things like security questions or multi-factor authentication codes, the proxy can ask for those, the phishing proxy can ask for those, and submit them to the actual real banking site in the back end. So it's a pretty smart way that attackers have now got to try and circumvent that extra step of authentication we've got, that multi-factor authentication.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. So, it really comes down to being able to identify what's good or not. So hopefully some of the telemetry that, not to bring it back to product, but some of the telemetry that Shape Security brings is figuring out, hey, is this a real-time proxy that's talking to us as opposed to a real user talking to us?
Yeah, exactly. And then, they are very much kind of adapting. The majority of phishing traffic and sites that we're seeing are the more traditional, I would say not dumb phishing sites, but certainly not real-time phishing sites. But these real-time phishing sites, real-time proxies are presenting another problem because, as you said, it's one thing to have a security solution in place that can detect an automated transaction, one that is coming from a bot or a script. And there are lots of different kind of indicators that will help us try and figure that out. But when it's performed in real time, and in some cases, attackers aren't even using technical bots, they're using human bots, if you like. They're using kind of human click farms, as we call them. So they're having credentials being submitted by real people. So it might not be a bot of 1,000 compromised IoT devices, but it'll be a farm of 1,000 or maybe 100 real individuals all over the globe, taking those credentials and using a real web browser to actually log into the website as a real human would do. And so they're obviously, increasing what we need to do as defenders. They're kind of increasing the complexity of what it takes to identify that as being a fraudulent transaction.
Yeah. It's not good enough to just react to some of this stuff, but it sounds like we need to be more proactive to not let it happen in the first place. Some of that might be, actually, this is an occurrence that is happening across customers that I speak to when it comes to Shape security, is that credentials are out there. Can we just assume then, if credentials are posted somewhere, that they could very well have been used already, and in a way to make fraudulent bank transactions or fraudulent purchases on a site at this point, as soon as they hit the dark web?
You have to assume, yeah. I mean, it's something we kind of talk about an awful lot, I think, as security professionals, is the reuse of passwords, and that's clearly the main problem. It's not even so much that passwords are out there and they're being stolen; it's the fact they're being reused in so many places. I think certainly we need to be far more proactive. I think one of the things that hits home to me, or that becomes evident, is what education are we giving our customers and our staff? What are we telling them to do, to look out for? We still see so many emails from, genuine emails from organizations that have embedded links, and they're using HTML emails so that the actual URL is obfuscated, it's hidden by text. And all of these things make it really, really hard for the average, user of the web to identify what is a genuine domain, what's a fraudulent domain, what does it look like? I mean, they barely understand, I think most everyday users, what a domain name is, and what's a subdomain, and what's a path, and what should be genuine. One of the components I, putting my TLS nerd hat back on, I like to look for is how many of these phishing sites are using HTTPS encryption. So how many will go to the extent of having a certificate and the HTTPS in the URL? And it's the vast majority now. Across different data sets, we found from the internal data set, it looked like about 72% of all phishing sites were using valid HTTPS connections. From the data set we got from our partner Webroot, we had hundreds of thousands of active phishing sites that we were able to go and scan. And 78% of those were using encryption with valid certificates. So, and the reason I mention this is because this kind of traditional education we give to users, look for the padlock, look for the HTTPS, doesn't really mean much anymore. It means very little. So I think we need to be much smarter about, what we're saying to users, how we're educating them, and really what to look for specifically in the domain, until we figure out a way of really guaranteeing trust between links and domain names and certificates that the average layperson can understand. I think our education really needs to be focused on, forget the certificate, forget the HTTPS bits, really look at the kind of base domain, because again, attackers are using brand names in subdomains that they own to try and emulate sites. So a real common one is to have the attacker can have purchase their own attacking domain of, say, myphishingsite.com, which hopefully to most people would sound risky and not worth clicking on. But by having subdomains that include valid brand names like Amazon, Apple, Facebook, having a subdomain that reads something like amazon.ssl.securelogon. Totally trusted website honest.myphishingsite.com obfuscates the real domain to the average user. In fact, some of the sites I was scanning, the URL was so long that it pushed the actual real domain off the end of the address bar, such that unless you had a super wide monitor, you couldn't even see the base domain, even if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So I think we need to do a lot more about really trying to educate the user and what to look for when they visit websites.
One thing I think I noted, maybe it was from your 2019, or maybe it was from what I've seen of the 2020 report, was even extended validation certificates are being used as well, which I was surprised by. So I thought there was more vigor in giving those out.
Well, I think I believe that there's a very, very, very small percentage of extended validation or EV certificates being used fraudulently, as in directly for fraudulent sites. What is happening in most cases is that phishing sites are being hosted on blogging or hosting platforms that provide free, essentially, EV certificates. So Blogspot is still, I think, second year running, the kind of top hoster, if you like, of phishing sites. Now, Blogspot itself, I believe, has an extended validation certificate, which then means that any user of Blogspot that has a subdomain will also have an extended validation certificate. Now, that's not true in all cases, but I think it's another step, and it's one of the main reasons I think that a big conversation, or an ongoing conversation in the security and kind of crypto community has been the debate about whether EV certificates really provide any additional trustworthiness to connections or not. So, and I think really because of this, the general consensus is that no, they don't.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I believe those certificates are more costly as well. And so folks that have gone out and spent the money and thought they were doing a good service now are kind of losing out on that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, you'll find, where a couple of years ago, most web browsers would show the organizational name that was registered in that EB cert, in that kind of green area by the padlock in the address bar of the browser. For a while now, they've no longer been showing it because it means very little. So even if you do have an EV cert now, to the end user, they won't even notice.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I guess that's is devalued significantly at this point.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we just got about a minute and a half left, David. I don't know if you have any final words for us. Obviously folks should be watching for the F5 Labs site within the next week or so for your report to come out. Any other final words?
I think we've covered a good amount actually today. I would say that we are looking at kind of expanding this research. Typically we've put these reports out once a year. I think similarly to the application protection research series, we're looking at making more kind of iterative updates as well. So whilst there'll be a kind of big bang approach or a big bang release for getting this report out there in a couple of weeks, we're actually looking at because we're still studying the data. We're still looking, we've had so much data to go through. We're still making discoveries. It was only just a few days ago that I was able to determine what the most phished brands of the past 6 months have been. So those kind of updates, anything that we don't manage to get into this main report in the next week or so, we'll find we'll either produce second edition or kind of revised editions of the report. So we'll be releasing as supplementary kind of articles onto the F5 Labs site. So absolutely the best thing to do is, if you haven't already, visit f5labs.com. You can subscribe to the email notifications, and then hopefully you'll be kept up to date with everything that we publish.
Yeah, well, that's also a good reason for your third appearance on Booze Hour live stream as well, for any sort of updates
Exactly.
like that. So you'll be earning a pretty big plaque by next year. Very cool. Well, thanks for coming on, Dave. Great to have you on. Always awesome to have the F5 Labs teams on. Or team members on. What I will say is that look out for more live streams probably in a couple weeks. We'll do another run of these with hopefully some new stuff to talk about from F5. And otherwise, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/DarylandBoo. That's where all the content, other content has been coming out. I'm still going to do live streams as they come up, but some of the recorded stuff that I've been editing together, and people can see fun stuff like my drone flying skills and me going around and seeing other folks where possible. We're not in lockdown at this point, doing things as in safe means always, but yeah, that content will be on the YouTube channel. So check out that if you can. Otherwise, thanks a lot, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
And we will see everybody next time.
Bye
folks. Thanks for checking this out today. If you're watching via YouTube right now, go ahead and click subscribe down below. Also click the bell for notifications. That way you will find out when we are dropping a new video or when we're going live. Also, there's DarylandBoo.com. If you head over to that, leave your name and email address, we will drop a weekly technical newsletter in your inbox every Monday. Also, this is available via podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify. Head over to one of those, hit subscribe, and you'll be able to listen to us in the car on your commute or during a walk or a run. Thank you very much, and we will see you next time.